Morning, good day wherever you are throughout the world, periscopers. I am in Clackheaton in West Yorkshire at the Talking Zebras. I don't know what to call it. It's a poetry workshop or some such thing, and I'm going to be reading 2 or 3 extracts from some of my electronic books that you can buy on Kindle. That's an advert. Right. I say 2 or 3 because I've got 15 minutes and I haven't timed them, so I may have to drop one or something or other. We'll see how we go. Now, the first one is from a series of books called Wonderful Women. And I'm going to tell you a secret. I am writing them, but I'm writing them under the name of a relative of mine, Kathleen Knowles, because I think they should be written by a woman. But when I was in Iraq as a human shield, I was asked to sing at an all-women's international, that's somebody else's phone, not mine, an all-women International Women's Day event. I said, it may have escaped your notice, but I'm not actually a woman. And they said, that's all right, Karl, as far as we're concerned, you're an honorary woman. So that's one of the things I'm most proud of. Anyway, the first thing I'm going to read is called 1789, this is Wonderful Women, Marianne, the Red Drummer Girl, and this is a true story, and I've got a picture here that I'm going to try and show on the, these are the event that the story describes. Marianne, the Red Drummer Girl from 1789, a true story. Nobody knows my name, but my friends call me Marianne. I was just 13 on that day in 1789 when I started beating on my brother's toy drum. But what happened then made me grow up fast. I was hungry. When I started beating on the drum, I took up the rhythm of the cries of the women of Saint-Eustache, queuing up outside the empty baker's shop. Give us bread! Give us bread! We want bread! Women came running from every direction, housemaids with their brooms and fire irons, fishwives and stallholders of the markets, working women of the faubourg, smartly dressed bourgeoises and des femmes à chapeau. Some brandished ancient pistols, though none had ammunition for them, I think. Our noise awoke my papa, asleep in his bed as usual when my mother went in search of something for our petit déjeuner. The baker can't set you what he ain't got, he yelled. You need to talk to the mayor. You go, came the cry, but all we could hear was his renewed snoring. So we set off, me with my drum, the women's chorus calling out in the same rhythm, to the Hôtel de Ville, and some were calling à la lanterne. By this, they meant, we should go to the palace of that name in Versailles, where King Louis held court. But I remembered that it could also mean the lamppost, where the angry crowd had hung Joseph Foulon de Douai, the King's Controller General of Finances, on the 22nd of July. As we marched through the city streets, people joined us from outside Paris. Word had got round that women were on the march. As I've said, there were a few rusty pistols being carried by my sisters on the march, as well as sticks, pikes, axes, crowbars and bludgeons, and also kitchen implements such as cleavers and carving knives. When we got to the Hôtel de Ville, we disarmed the guards and took their weapons from them, likewise the National Guards on the stairs who greeted us with levelled bayonets. We broke into the armoury and seized guns and even cannons, as well as 3 money bags containing wads of 1,000-livre notes. But our object was satisfaction, not robbery. So we disregarded much more money, including 3.5 million livres in cash, and the looted notes were returned a few weeks later. By the same token, we tore up civic papers and the debt ledgers that held all the people in bondage. Though this was a women's march, we did not mind if men fell in behind us. First to do so were demolition workers walking on the Bastille, which was now vacant following the storming of the prison in July. About 11 o'clock, we persuaded the bell ringer of the church of Sainte Marguerite in the Faubourg Saint-Antoine to sound the tocsin. which brought more people on the streets to join our throng. We were now several thousand strong. Some said 8, others 10,000, but who could tell? All I knew was we owned the streets, and my drum arms were getting tired, but not my legs, though we now set out to march the 12 or so miles to Versailles. Got a runny nose, that's not part of the story. Run tan tan went my drum. We want bread was the slogan. Run tan tan, run tan tan. And gradually the shouted slogans began to become a song. Ça ira, ça ira, ça ira, we sang. Run tan tan went my drum. The shouted slogan became a message of hope. Run tan tan, all goes well, run tan tan, all goes well. We crossed the river to the Cité, followed the Quai des Orfèvres to the Pont Neuf, crossed over again to the Louvre, passed through the Tuileries Gardens and halted, some 6 or 7,000 of us, in the Place Louis XV. Finally, with thousands of us women, for on that day I became no longer a silly girl, but a mature woman, even though my courses hadn't yet flowed, all us women were taking our future into our own hands, not leaving it to men, coming out of the kitchen and bedroom onto the streets. All goes well when women take charge. And on to Versailles. At the Place des Armes in the Champs-Élysées, we threw down the weapons we had taken from the National Guard. Muskets and pistols and swords were men's work. We marched to a different drum, my drum. But the cannon we had seized and placed on carts pulled by farm horses from the farms we passed, them we kept as citizens' property commandeered for our purpose. On then along the right bank to Chaillot, and so to Sèvres, Viroflay and Versailles. How beautiful the gardens of the Tuileries, how much sweeter the air than the grime of the city, and how grand the palace of Versailles. It was now early evening, and a sickle moon soared over the palace gardens, casting a silvery light upon our sweat-stained faces. The National Guardsmen strove to prevent us from entering, but our press was too strong for them. As we saw ourselves in the myriad gilded mirrors, the entire panoply of royalty receded into insignificance. And into the chamber, where the deputies were meeting in special session, the clergy of the so-called First Estate, who cowered in their pews at the cries of "À bas la culotte," down with the priestly skull caps, à bas les calotins, down with those who wear them. And then the nobility, the Second Estate. But we, the Third Estate of commonalty, had entered, demand our rights. What do we want, they asked. Du pain et parler au roi, bread and speech with the king, was our answer. I do not know who at the time made most noise, we women or the men who we were confronting, whose cries were of terror, shame and anger. We subsided into some respectful silence, however, when that great man, Robespierre, rose to address the chamber. It was no longer just a matter of bread, he said quietly. It was of the rights of man. And of women too, we cried, and he nodded his head in silent agreement. Du pain, partons de langue du score, we cried, after he had resumed his seat. Bread, no more speechifying. The assembly voted to allow 6 of us to go before the king, and I went with them, my drum at my hip, as we mounted the gilded stairway. Ran-tan-tan, one landing, ran-tan-tan, and then a chamberlain ushered us into the royal presence. Was this the monarchy before which we had all bent the knee, a frightened King Louis hiding in his apartments, and we, modernistic followers of the immortal Maenads of Greek myth, drunk not on the fruit of Bacchus' vine, but on the power that ran red in our veins? That slut, that Marie Antoinette, demanded to know why we were so fussed about the lack of bread. Eat brioche, then, she said, in her ignorance of the realities of common life. She would pay for that stupidity one day soon. And the king asked for details of our requests. Our demands, we replied. The 17-year-old sculptress, Louison Chabray, put forward our case, her voice weak and trembling, for her craft was in her art, not in royal audiences. Indeed, she seemed like to faint when the king jumped down from his royal throne and took her in his arms. I must say we were all impressed, and also by the promises he made. Grains would be found, millstones would grind, and nothing be left wrong which a restorer of French liberty can right. His exact words, I assure you. We were ready to leave after His Majesty indicated that the audience was at an end, when someone, it was no Louison and certainly not me, cried, "In writing!" King Louis instructed his chamberlain accordingly. Outside in the cannons there had been some confrontations with the National Guard. Our cannon were pointed at the enemy, fuses were poised to set them off, and even a few shots were fired, the only victim being one of our cart horses. And we were still hungry. Where was our bread? 600 loaves were on their way. When no loaves appeared, we were promised rice. Again, nothing. So we butchered the dead cart horse, lit a huge fire, and roasted the meat. Many had not fed so well for many years or ever. In the assembly, the Chamberlain had brought the royal letter authorising and commanding the freest circulation of grains. All very well, but what of the price? It was necessary, and the Assembly agreed, to fix the price of bread at 8 sous the half quartern, butcher's meat at 6 sous the pound. The deputies departed in their carriages, and we made a path for them through the multitude, but we did not leave. The chamber now became the assembly of the third estate, the commonalty, and we conducted our proceedings somewhat in jest but serious in truth, under our satire. A woman from the market took the chair, speeches were made, motions were proposed and seconded and put to the vote, and all were passed unanimously. We still hungered, for there was no miracle worker on hand to feed this several thousand with the flesh of one scrawny cart horse. At length trays of bread, flagons of wine, and links of sausages arrived and were passed around. And then, having voted to suspend the much-hated penal code, not exactly replete with the scant provisions that had fed us, but not quite so hungered, we slept wherever we could, some of us on the benches of the chamber, some of us on the grass of the gardens. Louison took herself home, I know not how, but she was nowhere to be seen, having done her trembling duty before an equally frightened monarch. The next day, of course, muskets and cannon were fired on both sides, and the people made themselves a revolution. But just as Jesus first revealed himself to a woman at the tomb in Jerusalem, it was the women whose march first led the way for the fighting masses, and at the head, history will remember, I marched, tapping out on the drum, ran-tan-tan, ça ira, ran-tan-tan, ça ira, all will go well. How are we doing for time, Jim? Oh, we've got 3 minutes, okay.